Watching Lincoln Creek meandering through its north side neighborhood in mid-November of this year, it may have been hard to believe that for 30 years, residents along this creek faced flooding on a regular basis. There were 4,000 separate problems between 1960 and 1998. That should now be an unpleasant chapter in the history of this neighborhood. Alderman Willie Wade, whose 7th district includes much of the Lincoln Creek area, chaired the Unity Caucus, a group of elected officials from the city, county, and state who represent the affected areas.
This area will no longer be in the 100-year floodplain map area, which means that people who were required before to have floodplain insurance will no longer be required to carry that insurance. Now, if they still choose to carry that insurance, they may, but it will no longer be a requirement, which will be lots of savings to a lot of people in this area.
The 9-mile-long Lincoln Creek drains a 21-square-mile urban watershed, mostly in the city of Milwaukee. Neighbors near Lincoln Creek were ravaged by what were called 100-year floods in 1997 and 1998. Then Congressman Tom Barrett and Hillary Clinton were among those who visited the neighborhood in August of 1998, when it was declared a federal disaster area. Officials at all levels decided something had to be done to reduce the risk of flooding for the neighbors. The $119 million Lincoln Creek Environmental Restoration and Flood Management Project did just that. Correcting the problem included 10 separate projects and the removal of more than 2.1 million cubic yards of earth and 1.8 miles of concrete. The project was completed in 2002, nearly 2 years ahead of schedule. The floodplain is now limited to the banks of the creek.
It's a big savings, a big problem that I really never had. My home never been flooded. I mean, I had to have it just because I had a home in that area. So it's going to be pleasing to me that not to have that burden of paying that big chunk of money once a year. So.
How much you pay? What does it cost you?
It costs me $650 a year.
What do you think about the way it looks, what they've done?
Oh, it looks beautiful. It really looks nice, the way they redesigned the bridges and the waterways. It looks beautiful. It's more attractive that way.
Construction began in late 1998. Where concrete once lined the creek, a more natural waterway with rock-lined creek beds now exists to keep the creek's flow within its banks during heavy rainstorms. To keep peak stormwater runoff flows from spilling over creek banks, designers created 2 storage detention basins. They are the Green Tree Detention Basin, capable of storing 52 million gallons of stormwater, and the Havenwoods State Forest Detention Basin, with a 29 million gallon capacity. Officials held a news conference in November to announce approval of the new floodplain map and talk about what was called a real-world problem.
What was a real-world problem? They were being forced to pay $400 to $1,400 per year for flood insurance, a situation which is extremely difficult for people who are on fixed incomes, for people who are working class, who don't have that type of disposable income.
It was a $100 million investment in this area, and to increase the capacity of being able to hold this storm water. And I think that commitment to the residents who live in this area was definitely needed. I think they did an excellent job with the aesthetics of it. I mean, it looks absolutely great. They tried to make sure that it blended in with the neighborhood, that it wasn't some hodgepodge job that they put together. And I think that the residents kind of appreciate that. It was a hard task going through that process, but now that it's done and they're seeing the actual real work of MMSD, and they're feeling the benefit of the technological investment that's been put in this area, I think they appreciate it now.
The city has sent letters to Lincoln Creek property owners in the 1st, 2nd, 7th, and 9th aldermanic districts, stating that their properties are no longer in the 100-year floodplain district. This is the official document people need to take to their financial institution or insurance agent when they want to stop paying flood insurance premiums.
And I'll sign it, and then we're on our way to the racetrack. All right, we're in business. So thank you all very, very much for your help, and I'm sure the citizens who live in the Lincoln Creek area are very thankful as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
The mayor's signature officially changed the boundaries for the Lincoln Creek floodplain. Members of the Unity Caucus and representatives of the Department of Public Works were on hand as Mayor Barrett signed the new ordinance into law.
This is a real example of government at work and how good elected officials can have a positive impact on the daily lives of individuals. There has been a huge change, just a huge change in the flood reaction, if you will, to that area. So much so that last year in May, when we had the wettest May in over 110 years, there was no flooding. And that, in many regards, was the proof in the pudding that the actions taken by MMSD, by the City of Milwaukee, with the help of the federal government, succeeded in our goal, which was to end the flooding in the Lincoln Creek area.
What I'd like to say is this is an example of us working together in unity to serve the constituents which we all represent. We got together and we got in contact with the right people to make sure that we could get our constituents some relief from basically what was an unnecessary tax. So getting everything changed and switched around, having the Department of Public Works help us in this effort. This is a good day for the City of Milwaukee. This is something that I personally am very proud of as the chair of the Unity Caucus, and I think events like this will happen over and over as the Unity Caucus start to work on ways to combine our efforts to make sure that we are efficient and that we prioritize when it comes to delivering government service.
The Department of City Development website now contains a section that allows people to view maps containing flood hazard information and to check whether a property is located within a floodplain. Check the website at mkedcd.org, check floodplain, or call 286-8211 for floodplain information. Although the project's main focus was to reduce the risk of flooding for homes and businesses from the 100-year storm, it also included measures to enhance the attractiveness of the corridor, to improve water quality and wildlife habitat. That included the planting of over 1,200 trees and over 14,000 shrubs. And the Lincoln Creek project now serves as a national model for urban flood management. For the next several months, you'll be seeing billboards like these, 35 of them throughout the city of Milwaukee. They urge citizens to use the anonymous, toll-free, reward-based hotline to report crime. The Crime Prevention Initiative ensures anonymity.
Many people are afraid to contact the police because they're afraid that they're going to be retaliated against. By using this number, it is totally anonymous. They're not calling the police department. They're calling another entity, the WeTip Hotline. The people on the WeTip Hotline will not take their name, but they will pass the information on to us. I've said time and time again, the police cannot do it alone. We need the cooperation of the citizens to work with us. And this is another avenue where we can get that cooperation. Because I know in my heart, and I'm sure you know in yours, that there's someone out there who knows who is committing these crimes. And the only way we can solve them is to get cooperation from the citizens of the city of Milwaukee. We want to make our neighborhoods safe.
Clear Channel Outdoor donated the 35 billboard locations and presented a copy to Susan Aguilar, WeTip's Chief Executive Officer, at a December news conference. The location of the event was deliberate, a gas station at 37th and Villard. It was near here in the 3600 block of West Villard that 41-year-old Henry Cox, Jr., walking home from a second shift job on November 15th, was fatally shot. Police had few clues and asked people to use WeTip to help solve this crime.
According to witnesses' statements, he was approached from behind by two males, and they got to about 5 to 10 feet behind him, and Mr. Cox began to run for unknown reasons, at which point one of the suspects raised his arm, fired a shot, which struck Mr. Cox. Mr. Cox then ran onto the lot, collapsed, and later died.
Police say witness accounts indicate two young men appeared to have been following the victim when he was shot. The older of the two is believed to have done the shooting. Someone knows what happened, say officials, and they need the help of the public in solving these types of crimes.
It's the people in the community that have the information, that have the abilities to solve these crimes and give the police the information that's necessary in order for them to solve a lot of these crimes. We want to give them the safest avenues that's possible in order for them to relay these messages to the police department so that these crimes can be solved and that we can create an environment where it's uncomfortable for people to commit these atrocious acts. And so as we move forward to try to change these types of things that are happening in our community, I want to just encourage all that see the number and all that know things that are happening in the community to use the number to call so that these crimes can be solved. And I really don't consider that to be snitching either. I feel like that's being responsible.
In addition to the billboards, 6 Clear Channel radio stations will be running a minimum of 300 30-second public service announcements promoting WeTip.
Take back the streets of our community by reporting crimes without fear. You can help fight crime in Milwaukee. The police cannot do it alone. Call the WeTip Hotline at 1-800-78-CRIME to place your completely anonymous crime tip. It's a reward-based hotline with callers getting rewards of up to $1,000 for crime tips. Want a safer neighborhood? It's your call. 1-800-78-CRIME.
The WeTip program is like a huge neighborhood watch. People are working together to solve a common problem.
I think that the more that people become aware of the existence of programs such as WeTip, the more there is a feeling that something can be done about crime.
When you start to clear serious crimes, robberies, homicides, and sexual assaults, for example, the payback is just immeasurable.
People like you are picking up the phone and calling WeTip anonymously. WeTip doesn't want to know who you are. They just want to know who's out there breaking the law. WeTip is stopping gang violence.
This is the story of WeTip, the secret witness program that works nationwide 24 hours a day, promising callers complete anonymity and generous rewards for leads that result in convictions. WeTip is the people's voice against crime.
Hello, this is the WeTip Hotline.
If we can encourage people to provide us with even small pieces of information, that sometimes can be that critical last piece of a puzzle that facilitates an arrest. To the extent that you can solicit the assistance of people in providing you information, in becoming your early warning system, and respond to that, you have in fact increased resources without increasing budgets.
The whole concept of the program is this is the police department's time to tell people what it is in the way of information that they need, what it is that's missing, and create a feedback mechanism.
As crime in American cities reaches epidemic proportions, city governments need to work in partnership with individual citizens to regain control of their communities. WeTip provides a powerful program to begin this important process. WeTip operates toll-free lines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The caller's identity is never known, and information is immediately conveyed to the appropriate law enforcement agency. In addition, WeTip supports city governments and law enforcement agencies with a comprehensive package of educational materials, seminars, and kits for mounting a public awareness campaign. WeTip can make getting involved a reality for your community. WeTip is the people's voice against crime.
Milwaukee and Milwaukee County joined the WeTip program in February of 2005. By the end of October, WeTip had received over 200 crime tips, substantially more than the year before. Tips on graffiti vandalism have been especially helpful in Milwaukee. Asking people to call WeTip has been a priority of the Department of Neighborhood Services for some time. It sponsored billboards and placards on buses that travel throughout the city.
Department of Neighborhood Services is about trying to make the city of Milwaukee a good place to live and to invest. And Milwaukee is is hurt by people who do graffiti because it sends a very negative message about the city. It's probably not the intention of the people who are doing it. They probably just want their notoriety in their moment of fame. But the people who see it think fear or bad place. And so we try to take an effort to do 2 steps to attack the problem. First is prevention, and that's where the WeTip issues come in, to try to get the police and others to work to actively try to stop these people from doing it. And then there's the removal, and that is to, once it's on there, to get it off. And we've been working this program to do a 2-step approach to the problem. We have a billboard currently at 35th and National, and we have the bus placards that will run through March, and it basically says the WeTip hotline number, and it focuses on graffiti, but it says any crime. And we think this is a good way to try to bring the community into the problem of trying to solve the problem of continuing graffiti vandalism. We already know that the police have pursued arrests and gotten convictions as a result of information that they've gotten from off the WeTip line for graffiti vandals. So we know it works. We're going to continue it through March. We're going to assess whether or not it's working the way we think it is, but right now we're seeing the results that we intended. We were looking for a way to distinguish the literature that's out there that people see at community meetings about various programs, and so this is a handle, looks like a dollar bill, not enough so that it gets us in trouble with counterfeit laws, but it catches people's eyes, and it says basically, hey, you could make some money if you're willing to anonymously turn in some of these vandals up to $1,000. And they've been very popular. They're picked up a lot when we put them out at various community events throughout the city.
The Department of Neighborhood Services also has a graffiti hotline, 286-8715. When should you call the city? When should you call WeTip?
If they know about who the vandal is that's doing this, that's where the WeTip part comes in. Use that WeTip number. They can make some money, and they can help us by taking some of these vandals out of the process of doing it. If the graffiti's already up there, and they can report to us at the hotline number.
And if it's in process, they can call 911, right?
911 is an appropriate call number for graffiti in process. Now, graffiti vandals often work very quickly. Okay, so it's not very often that people will be able to see it. But if they do, and they can identify someone, particularly what kind of clothes they're wearing, what kind of color, a jacket they've got on, or pants, or some identifying marks of the people, it's important to call 911. We need the public, because we need to have them call in to our hotline. And we need them to report the graffiti, because what we do is we turn around and we notify the property owners about the existence of the graffiti and tell them that they've got to get it off. We'll offer free paint if they want, but it's the responsibility of that property owner or that owner of that piece of equipment to get it off as quickly as possible. There's one sure rule we've learned about graffiti, and that is that graffiti, which is an act of notoriety, an attempt at notoriety, that the faster you remove it, the less likely it is to recur at the same location, because the vandals who put it up are looking for a location to keep it up. And if you get it off quickly, it's less likely it is to come back to that location.
More than 420,000 anonymous tips have been reported to the WeTip hotline. School tips include information on bullying, drugs, graffiti, and vandalism. Municipalities want to know about child abuse, crimes in public housing and on buses. Law enforcement gets tips on homicides, drugs, robbery, sexual assault, and terrorism. And corporations want to know about insurance fraud and bank crimes. WeTip officials held a seminar in December to draw public attention to the hotline and encourage other police, communities, and businesses to get involved. Participants were asked to consider the questions that might be posed when they get a call about graffiti vandalism.
Who do you think knows who's done this? The kids that did it? They know they've done it. Maybe the friends of the kids that did it, because they brag. That's why they do this. Maybe the parents or the siblings of the kids that did it. because they're proud of what they've done. They didn't wash up before they went home. Maybe somebody was driving by or walking by and saw this while it was happening, but in turn were seen by the kids as they were doing it. And out of all of those potential witnesses, who do you think might be willing to call the police? Sometimes these people, whether they were walking by or whether they were friends or related to, they're afraid to call the police. They're afraid of retribution, or they know the person involved, or they're just afraid for their family. And that's where WeTip comes in. It is not to replace the police at all, but we're a conduit for anybody that is just unwilling to be identified but wants to give information, that wants to remain anonymous and be able to do the right thing. Now, what happens when somebody calls the hotline is the very first thing they're going to hear is this is the WeTip crime hotline. Do not give your name or identify yourself in any way. If at any time during the conversation the informant stops to identify themselves, the operator is going to stop and say, I'm sorry, I have to disconnect this call. Please call back and speak to another operator. Because we want that information, but we cannot know who is on the other end.
Milwaukee Police Captain Tim Berkey was instrumental in bringing the crime hotline to Milwaukee, and he was named a 2005 WeTip Law Enforcement Officer of the Year.
What caught my eye as a manager, somebody who has to balance effectiveness and efficiency, was here we have an organization that has been up and running and established for a lengthy period of time. In-house at their central location, they have a bank of operators, not just English-speaking, but bilingual, Spanish-speaking as well, 24/7. This is a ready-made program. It can be dropped into place, and we don't have to do anything except get the word out and wait for the tips to start rolling in.
Throughout the seminar, Captain Berkey and all speakers stressed that names are never taken at 800-78-CRIME.
I like to be able to honestly look a person in the face and say, if you call this number, it is going to be strictly confidential. There is absolutely no way that your name is going to be given to the police. Now, why would a police officer want to tell somebody that? I would rather talk to the person face to face, get that information, be able to go back to that person, verify it, confirm it. That's part of my investigative background. But if I can't have that, I at least want the information. So that's why I tell people, honestly, call this number. There's no way that your name is ever going to be released in any police reports. And if WeTip is subpoenaed to provide the information, they can't turn over what they don't have. It does raise the confidence level in the community of Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee. We've had community groups that have just been inundating the chief with how do we get this information to you without putting ourselves at risk. This is how we do this, and we are getting the confidence level up within our communities.
We have no taping, tracing, or caller ID. And I can't stress that enough. We absolutely do not know who's on the other end of the phone. Now, there is a huge difference between confidential and anonymous. And unfortunately, today, those terms are used interchangeably a lot. But confidential means somebody knows who you are and they promise not to tell until they get subpoenaed. Anonymous means having a name withheld. Anonymous is having a name withheld, and we just don't know who is on the phone. We have been doing this for 33 years. Coming up on 34 actually, since 1972, and we have never, in all of that time, had a caller identified. So it's very important that the people in your communities understand that we are completely and totally anonymous.
And we have been subpoenaed hundreds, maybe thousands of times, and all we have is the exact piece of paper that we have given to law enforcement, and that has already been subpoenaed. So we have to tell them that over and over again. With WeTip, there is absolute trust, and we want to keep it that way. There's never been a breach of trust. There's never been an informant identified. There's never been any kind of circumstance where an informant has been put in danger in any way, because it can't happen. We have aided law enforcement in seizing over $340 million worth of drugs and narcotics. We don't determine what's a good or a bad tip. We don't know what's a good or a bad tip. You guys know what's good and what's bad, and it may be just a little missing link to a puzzle that you may need, and we have no idea. You know, we get some of the wackiest tips in the whole world, but before 9/11, we got some wacky ones that said people were going to fly their planes into the World Trade Center. At that time, it seemed outrageous. Who would have ever known that something like that could really happen? So we don't presume to know what's weird and what's not and what's true and what's false. We send it all to you. You know what's going on in your community.
We've all seen newspaper stories describing horrible crimes in the country. WeTip officials say many serious crimes, including school shootings, have been foiled because of tips to the hotline.
We work with schools across the nation. You know, putting super glue in the locks doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's huge. The financial cost to take care of that is incredible. So if something's going on in one of your communities, it's great to call WeTip. Theft, burglary, discrimination, terrorism, bullying. Bullying is a huge issue in our schools today. You know, this is a tip that nobody has actually heard about. You've all heard of Columbine, I know. You've all, I'm sure, heard of the recent shootings in the past year and a half. But we got this tip, and it's from Laramie, Wyoming. And it says that this little boy is going to take a knife and kill his mother and father. He's going to take the knife and kill a female student who's named in the tip, 13-year-old girl, and then a 14-year-old boy. He's going to cut up their bodies and put the body parts in the crawl space of his house. Pretty gruesome. When we get this tip, the caller says, I don't know if this is true or not. We don't know if it's true or not. It's not important to us. We don't decide if it's good or bad information. We send it along. And we sent this tip along. Law enforcement went out, and the boy surrendered his knife. This, in fact, was going to happen. You didn't hear about it on the news because it didn't happen because somebody called WeTip. And that's what we want.
WeTip is for all types of crimes. It's not just for large urban cities. It's working in rural areas as well.
In real estate, the success of a sale in real estate, you've heard it before, location, location, location. I think with any program, it's advertising, advertising, advertising. If you don't advertise a program, don't waste your time. It's not going to get off the ground level. We've advertised WeTip since 1998, and it's been a very successful program for us. Provide the people with an avenue to call. Like Sue said, somebody knows, somebody wants to tell, give them that avenue to call.
We're happy with WeTip for a couple of reasons. The effort that we put in is not that great. We figured out it's a nickel a person for Jefferson County. That's a bargain. The other issue is, by people calling in, Jefferson County has been able to attain the highest conviction rate in the last 5 years on percentages of WeTips in the country. We're very proud of that. It's a good working relationship between the DA, WeTip, and us, and all law enforcement in Jefferson County. So it does work. I cannot get that information. There's not a judge in the world that can get it because they don't ask for your name. They don't want it. And if you're in Watertown, Wisconsin, and you WeTip somebody in Milwaukee, and you don't want the local postmaster, you guys have got a little more luxury in that way. Todd and I, you walk into our local post offices, Mary Sue and Betty know everybody. You can have that sent to Ashland. And I tell people that, and they're like, wow, I can I can do the right thing, because it's amazing. Most people want to do the right thing. A lot of them don't even care about the money. That's just an added bonus for them. But it's a great program. I'm glad you're taking part in it, and as long as you can get the message out, it'll continue to work for you.
WeTip officials say the hotline has affected more lives than anyone will ever know. The more than 420,000 anonymous tips over its 34 years have led to 15,000 criminal arrests and nearly 8,000 convictions. And WeTip says thousands of crimes and tragedies have been prevented because citizens got involved through the WeTip hotline.